everybody. My name is Sara Edmonds, and I wear several different hats. I'm not even sure whose hat I'm wearing this morning, but I represent Built Environment Smarter Transformation in Scotland, ACAN, Architects Climate Action Network, HEAL, Home Energy Action Lab, lots of stuff all about retrofit. And I think we all know that that's a big area of focus, and we want to see more as this year continues. But we've got some excellent speakers for you this morning, focusing on retrofitting schools. And we're just going to get straight into it. So first we've got Harry Paticas. And Harry, do you want to come and, yeah?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I was told to stand here and look towards this mic and look at Sally, is it? Just to make sure that you get the right spread. So at the back, can you hear me all right? Yeah? So that's good, great. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. I am Harry Paticas. I am the Managing Director and founder of RAFT, which stands for Retrofit Action for Tomorrow. We are a community interest company limited by guarantee, so we have no shareholders or ownership, and we are very committed to helping communities move towards zero carbon. So normally I do sort of half an hour talks, and I've compressed a half an hour talk into about 10 minutes. So this is a kind of quick race through what we do. We want to leave more time for questions at the end, so we can talk more. And I'm very happy to talk to people afterwards as well. So if you have any questions, happy to discuss. So we're a practice of 22 people. We have a hybrid home office working setup. We have employees in Leeds and Birmingham and Southampton, and we're based in County Hall with sustainable workspaces in Lambeth. So you can describe what we do in three key phrases. The first one is deep retrofit, and we deliver deep retrofit projects at an estate scale. So we're working at the moment, this is actually Lewisham, but we're working with working on a high-level heat decarbonisation plan for all schools in Lambeth and all schools in the Southwark Diocesan Board of Education. We also, we're looking at them in this way. This is all redacted information, so I sort of deleted stuff off the graph just for client confidentiality until reports are released. So we're looking we're creating an estate-wide heat decarbonisation plan to enable local authorities to plan the decarbonisation of schools up to 2030. And just interestingly, and we can talk about this later, but there's sort of a new phrase that I'm starting to hear more about is net zero carbon compatible. We can talk more about that in the Q&A. So I've put this slide up because this is one of 17 schools we're working on at the moment, and this is just one block in one school. And those are just an example of the sheer number of different thermal elements that we're having to deal with and understand as part of our heat decarbonisation process. So this retrofit activity is actually really, really complicated. This is an example of how we might deal with one block, and this was funded through PSDS1, and we've actually completed this retrofit. It's a whole building retrofit. It's a kind of pragmatic approach. It's not Enofit. It doesn't have floor insulation, but it does have moisture management. It does have MVHR. It has repointed cavity walls, cavity wall insulation. Single glazing was replaced with triple glazing, but it was cost effective. It was achievable within PSDS1 budgets with a little bit extra from the council. PSDS1 was more money than PSDS3. It's now lower, so you can't do this anymore. Unfortunately, you have to get additional funding. And I've put this slide in because we're working really right from the estate scale all the way down to the detail, and we really care about repointing. Just don't want to be installing cavity wall insulation without making sure that the walls are ready to take it and that we know we're going to get long-term sort of good building performance. So the second key phrase to describe what we do is community engagement. And I think that this is really a very core part of what we do. We love working with schools and with children. It's basically fun, and we just feel that we deliver our plans and we deliver them with action research with the children, and it means they learn more, the whole school community learns more, and then we can get a ripple effect out beyond into the community. And my best moment in 2022 was when a parent called me up and just said, just want to let you know that last night we were talking about retrofit at the kitchen table, and and for me that's what it's about. We want to reach out beyond the school. We've mapped what that school community sort of looks like, and we're sort of thinking about how we can connect with all these people. And this is a drawing that we did for the recent McEwen Awards to try and describe the way in which we're reaching out into the community. So this talks about all those effects from the school beyond. Some of you might have heard about this. This is the Hot Baked Potato Challenge. So this is about teaching principles of retrofit to children with a bit of fun. So we get natural insulation materials, and we get a thermographic camera and a digital thermometer to make it kind of technical. And we teach them basically about thermal continuity and the performance of buildings. We've got lots of FLIR C5 thermal cameras that we share amongst the children. We've got exercises such as Follow the Heat, where we say, where's the heat source in your classroom? And they all rush off and try and find it, and then we say, right, we're going to follow it. So we follow it down corridors, through rooms, and we go all the way back to the boiler room, and we stand in the boiler room, we say, right, where's the gas coming from? And then we sort of have this sort of wider discussion about fossil fuels and the relationship of the school to the wider world. We do a waste audit, and the children at this school are still talking about that apple, a year and a half later. This slide, this was actually a handover, a soft landings for MVHR, but it's a proxy for a lot of engagement that we're doing, quite a lot of which is online, and we're working with all premises managers in Lewisham, school premises managers in Lewisham, and all school premises managers in Lambeth, and we're actually running a program, a premises manager training program. We're running a program of how to cut carbon at your school, how to save energy, and we're giving them lots of tips and creating a kind of sort of network of feeding ideas from us to them and from services engineers to them and between themselves as well. So then the final part is zero carbon, and you've got scope 1 as the light blue, scope 2 is the dark blue, and scope 3 is the yellow. The yellow is, as you can see, is a really significant part. Scope 3 emissions, the purchasing at schools. So we feel that we want to be addressing that. We're in a really good place to address that and to support schools on that journey, and that aligns with the Ashton Let's Go Zero 2030 campaign, which we support. And this is an example where I asked the children if they were signed up, and they said, we don't know. So we went to the head teacher's office and they said, can we sign up, please? And the head teacher said, can you put your case forward? So we had to go off and develop a case, and we went back to the head teacher, put the case forward, and the head teacher said, no problem, and signed up on the spot. So that's their thumb saying we're now pledged to go zero carbon by 2030. So we've developed an online calculator for scopes 1, 2, and 3, and we're sort of calling it about a 200 DPI calculator. So it's not super detailed, that needs loads of information to input. It's not really basic like a simple app on the phone. It's sort of pitched somewhere in between the two. And this helps us sort of track carbon emissions on a year by year basis. And then we can produce very simple little graphics like this. I was asked to talk about the genesis of ROF, so this is a very quick how did this all come about? So it started with about 10 years of deep retrofit experience on domestic properties, and they range from listed buildings all the way through to modern buildings that also are quite problematic. My house is the one that's 1978, and my mum's house is the 1921. And the 1841, some of you might know, it's on the Historic England website, and it was a retrofit. It's Rectory Grove. It's a Grade 2 listed house. And that's actually really where I started retrofit, kind of on that journey. This is my house. It's a step-by-step Enefit project, and we're kind of well on the way. We're actually now net zero carbon. We're producing more energy from our solar panels than we actually use over the year. We have an air source heat pump, so we're in a sort of really wonderful spot at the moment. And this is where RAF started. So it was about me wanting to share what we were doing with our local community. And so my son and I leafleted the whole community, and we invited people to Passive House Open Days. This is me talking to my son. This is just a bit of fun. This is just, he engaged with the retrofit process, and that was the key, is that I suddenly realized that him engaging with the step-by-step retrofit of the house was there was a kind of light bulb moment of thinking, wow, we could actually do this with a school, and we can actually engage children, and they do find it interesting. Empowering them to make change in their schools is a good thing, and why should they not understand what pipes are on ceilings and what the build-up of a wall is? You know, it's interesting to them. So he made some beautiful posters. He made about 10 of these. This is about cork. So he was in year 3. He's now year 6. So you can tell that's the sort of the 3-year period of the genesis of raft. And this is about cork, and we talked about where does it come from. And at the end he says, "Finished cork wall, the end. Now we feel warm." We then went on the climate march, the really big one, and our poster says, "Retrofit your home and life." I then started doing workshops, and this is the hot baked potato challenge with the different materials, it's got cork, sheep's wool, recycled polyester and wood fibre, and we just played with them and gave them some basic rules. Then started working with Lewisham, so suddenly went from working on quite small domestic properties to big complicated schools with multiple periods of construction and much more complex programs. So I was asked to briefly summarize what we're discovering. So this is a sort of romp through things that we found. The first one that we found is that if we package together what we're calling the raft pragmatic approach of medium-term work, so works that are relatively fundable through current funding, we can actually cut carbon emissions by about 60% on a kind of consistent basis across schools. If we spend another £1 million or another £2 million, we might cut another 5% carbon, and that just does not seem worth it. So generally speaking, external wall insulation and internal wall insulation are out. Renewing windows, keeping double glazing in makes sense. So we're sort of adopting this pragmatic approach that does significant reduction in carbon but doesn't cost the earth. We're finding a lot of modern construction is just as bad as anything. This is a brand new roof, and the white is massive air leakage. It's actually holes that big in a warm roof. If there was one slide that would be the most sobering slide for all of you to take away, I suspect there are millions of walls in the UK like this. This is your most standard wall detail. These boards should be stuck to, nice and tight, to that inner leaf of blockwork with a nice clear cavity and no thermal bypass. But this is what we're finding. We're also finding this, which I think you just have to laugh at, really. This is an air source heat pump that's gone into a historic porch. But the problem is that the air will be being pushed out, and then it will be sucked in, and it's going to be doing a kind of looping. And this doesn't meet the installation criteria for air source heat pumps, as you can imagine. It's also going to make that porch quite cold. So we're also finding that there are really massive distribution losses generally in some schools. They're really rather staggering. We're finding that when we investigate deeper into the building fabric, such as drilling holes and borescopes, we find a lot of debris in the base of walls. So we are taking bricks out, and we are hoovering the walls and cleaning that debris out. Then we repoint, then we install our cavity wall insulation. We're finding hit and miss insulation in roofs. So there's a walkway that wasn't insulated here. We're also finding this. This is very common, much more common than you can imagine. This is services coming in, basically, time and time again, never putting the insulation back where it should be. We're also finding signed-off building regs buildings. This is only 10 years old. Just the insulation never got in. That's just plasterboard with a rim below, and this was signed off. So this is alarming, but I don't want you to think that it's every classroom everywhere. This is a classroom in one school, but this is the kind of air quality that you can find in some classrooms, and it's really serious. Very happy to say that this classroom now has an absolutely fantastic MVHR unit in it, and it's got fantastic air quality. So we've managed to address this one, but there are still a lot more of these out there. This is fairly cheap Velux triple glazed windows replacing single glazing, and it wasn't that expensive. And that was great. We reduced the heat loss and we've actually reduced heat gain as well. It's triple glazing, it's got lower G values, so they get less heat gain in the mornings in the summer. But the thing that the school are most excited about are that we made it openable. So that top window, the top row opens. And what we didn't realise is usually you get unintended consequences. This is a happy unintended consequence, is that this now ventilates the whole school because that window is higher than every other classroom in the whole school. So every room is now cooled through the whole school just through this one intervention, which I didn't anticipate, but it's a really happy event. And then I'm going to finish. I've got 2 last slides. I just want to finish because these are comments last week from a premises manager training program. We've done a series of events, and it was just so great to see them engaging and feeling happy with us doing fairly simple workshops, just talking about radiator balancing and boiler flow temperatures and tight schedules, but just sort of slightly demystifying it for them, that they're sort of they don't have training, but just giving them a little bit, and then suddenly they're able to engage. And then the final slide is this sort of uplifting slide. It's children being happy. They've got a new air source heat pump, and it's really to say that what I'm finding is there's an incredible receptiveness to what we're doing, and I feel that there is a sea change taking place. So thank you.
Thanks, Harry. We're just going to do a quick changeover of slide decks, but I think I can already see people like questions and all the rest of it. There's some. Hold your questions just until we've heard from Duncan, but I'm sure then we'll have plenty of time for that. I think that's your slides, that looks like, yeah?
Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. Actually, I thought Harry's presentation was really good because that's what I'm aiming for, even though I'm an academic. I want to kind of show the PhD is relevant on the ground rather than just an academic project in itself. So hopefully I can do that in the next 10 minutes. So I'm a research fellow at UCL, working on retrofitting schools as well. But my question is whether there has to be kind of penalties, if you like, to the retrofit process and how I investigate it through my PhD research. So my definition of the problem is that we have classrooms, obviously, but how do we define performance? So in this room particularly, we'd want schools to be thinking about energy efficiency and how they would reduce energy emissions and energy costs. However, there's other things that schools are really worried about, and also DFE and other bodies such as attainment and health. Now, what we try to do at UCL is build models, and what the things that influence these models are the occupancy of the classrooms, but also the external weather and how the classrooms are set up, which are very individualised depending on where the classrooms are located and how they're operated. So we build models of buildings and run them for a typical sort of year, and that would tell us things like heating demand, which gives us insight into the energy costs, and these are the critical factors for my thesis, if you like, how we quantify indoor environment quality. I ended up going into this area actually because of COVID, because I couldn't get into schools to verify energy performance, but this is very much something that came up anyway earlier on in my PhD. And basically how external contaminants influence things like health, which we have a separate team within the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine with colleagues there that have helped us a lot with that. So what things models are trying to tell us, the things we need for models are that we have to have outputs which are relevant for the people actually working in school classrooms. So that would be things like, as I said, energy and IEQ, but how do we give them that information? And then for the models, we have a lot of information on geometry and fabric because we're building these based on national data sets, but we don't actually have much on how buildings are operated in practice and what has been installed, as well, as Harry alluded to with his presentation. And then we've also got these interactions. So if we look at energy in isolation, then we might not consider that school, for example, has issues with stuffiness, which means that the windows tend to be open more often than in other classrooms. So we have to consider these things together within the models. So my thesis, if you like, was how models can fit in this gap between school building users and the stock level stakeholders, who are the DFE, Department for Education, local government, academy trusts, construction professionals, and how we can basically build models that better inform these groups. And what I came to the conclusion with is, if we want to get information, and it's a two-way thing. So for school building users, we're kind of hoping that in the future school building users will give us information on how the buildings are performing, and that requires us to actually provide them with information through a process called crowdsourcing, which means that basically they're not just providing us stuff for free. We are actually telling them, no, this is how your data is being used. So that works also with stakeholders in the sense that we can't just present them with information. We have to actually ask them what they're looking at and what's going into the models. And we hope that in the future that means that school building users and policymakers are actually aligned through the modelling, if you like. So I approached this three different ways. First way was through actually getting out and speaking to stakeholders themselves. So there were the workshops, if you like, to find the motivational and informational drivers. In terms of data quality, there was a lot of work I did with analysing existing data sources, but I did also a questionnaire which I asked schools about the fabric and the building service operation going on in their schools. And then also I looked at the models themselves and how we were able to provide information out to the stakeholders and the building users, and whether it could show this interplay, if you like, between heating and ventilation and indoor environment and heating. So the stakeholder workshops, what they took place quite early on in the PhD, so early 2020, unfortunately, which, as you know, 3 years ago was when COVID struck. So I got 5 schools, different parts of London, and also spoke to 4 different groups. And the idea here was to just get an extreme set of views, if you like, to sort of build. It wasn't to find a typical group, but it was to actually really build a whole huge, not huge database of issues that schools were looking at, but try and get as many different points of view as possible. So these schools are all different types, different phases and different ages, critically. So there were lots of sort of disparate findings, but I wanted to kind of consolidate a bit for this, because so things that are very similar between the two groups. School building users both groups are not, at that time they weren't looking at energy use as being their absolute critical thing. They're obviously concerned about it, but they view schools use it as a kind of attractiveness thing. So if they're a green school, then it becomes something that attracts parents, because parents are obviously becoming more and more concerned about energy efficiency. Policymakers, actually surprisingly, are in the same boat, because in schools the programme has been to try and replace buildings that are literally falling down, and so they don't really have time in a way to really improve the entire stock. It's almost, are we, by focusing on this really badly performing set, are we actually doing enough to improve building performance? And in terms of informational drivers, what we can provide through models, what I found was both groups are looking to disaggregate, but in different ways. So the schools themselves aren't interested in the whole building. They get these display energy certificates, and they find that actually they want to know individual classrooms, individual teachers, what's the energy use breakdown. So schools that had dashboards with that were really quite informed, but others were just completely in the dark. And what I found was with the policymakers themselves, yes, they're interested in which schools are badly performing, but they want to know whether they can be fixed in terms of new buildings, or whether there's an operational issue related to potentially indoor environment. So having spoken to stakeholders, my thesis basically then involved looking at what they're able to provide in terms of data. And in terms of the availability of the data sets, I went out and tried to ask through a questionnaire various questions about fabric, and this bit did take place during COVID, so actually it was good in a way, because a lot of schools were suddenly interested in in energy through the fact that their buildings were being opened up, if you like, and schools were having to ventilate quite heavily at that point. So what I found was, this might not sound like a critical thing, but basically, in our models, we have no idea about how schools are, what the typical school day looks like. And the stark thing for me was when I asked primary schools if they're open during the week. Very few of them have evening events and things like that. But actually, most secondary schools do. And somehow we need to make that part of our modelling more, because those activities are the ones that sort of potentially skew the energy use, because they involve things like sports classes and potentially, if they're open at weekends, things like catering, which are quite heavy uses. So the point is that building users were able to contribute that data, and if we can better use it in the future, we can build more reliable models, because we can show how much of the activity is school day activity and how much is because the school has decided to essentially rent out their building. And then, so the thing that I wanted to get at as well was I managed to send out individualised questionnaires to about 1,000 schools, and I got 40 responses, which they were able to tell me about their school site. So they were able to articulate things that had changed or things that we had got wrong with their model. So basically, we get these data sets through LiDAR. So these are buildings that exist, and I was able to present to them a campus, if you like, as we see it in our model. And they were able to suggest things like buildings which are no longer in use, buildings which have been put in place, which are just fabricated buildings for short-term use, and also which buildings are just part of the, if you like, caretakers' buildings, things that aren't part of the school campus necessarily, but are considered to be the school site. And as a result, models can be improved that way. So looking at models actually themselves, what I eventually started to look at was, because schools had expressed this concern about overheating and things about attainment, I wanted to then look at how the school site affects that when we're talking about energy. So the last stage of the project was essentially to try and scale this up in terms of time and also in terms of the stock. So looking ahead, I wanted to basically show what happens when we change climatic conditions, but also when we're retrofitting and when we operate buildings to mitigate against the sort of problems we have. And I wanted to do it in lots of different types of classroom, but also considering different construction eras and geographical locations across the UK. So I created this model in Energy Plus and basically scaled it up in Python to include lots of different scenarios and also settings. And as a result, the sort of things I was finding, this table has a lot of information, so I'm just going to explain a few details briefly. Basically, anything in green is good and anything in red is bad, but to take you through it, the things on the left-hand side are the performance criteria, so basically things like overheating, the carbon dioxide levels in classroom, which is something that is kind of secondary to what we do, but very important for attainment. The external contaminants from NO2, and also emissions, which is obviously based on energy use. And for each of these, I have a kind of current scenario, which is this base op, and also when I ran lots of the scenarios, I came up with a best case, if you like. So this was a mixture of retrofit, best case retrofit, and best case operational scenario. And what this essentially shows along the top is different features. So I ran this model, ran different models 30,000 times, and basically I carried out some sort of regression analysis, which eventually showed a few things. So one of the first things was that although you can't really fix orientation, it becomes less of an issue on overheating as you become better at like ventilating the building at night. So what I'm trying to say there is, if you've got problems with a south-facing classroom, if you operate that, there is potential that could improve, so that orientation becomes less of an issue for overheating relative to other features such as the actual construction of the building and also the region of the building. So what I'm saying is that can be reduced through the measures that we suggested, which involved shading and albedo and night ventilation of the building. For external contaminants which were brought into the classroom, what we found was that modern constructions are actually slightly detrimental because we need to ventilate them, because they keep the heat better. We need to ventilate them more in the summer, when obviously in the mornings, for example, there's a lot more NO2 through traffic and such forth. And then another finding from this work was that the construction era is actually, and degree of retrofit are quite important for the emissions, which is obvious, but actually they're more influential than other features as the building's improved. So just as a follow-up, I want to say kind of thanks to people that have helped throughout my work, who are the people that were involved in the stakeholder workshops, but also Aspire team, as I said, people from London School of Hygiene, Tropical Medicine. Also, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to get in touch, because obviously I want to make sure this project is assimilated at all sorts of levels. It's not just an academic project. So I've left QR codes for both the papers that we've produced through this work, which hopefully provide more of the technical detail. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Duncan. You can sit there and then I can field some questions. I'm guessing that there are questions for both. I'd like to go straight to the floor because we've only got a little bit of time left. I see Seb straight away. Do you want to give Seb the mic there? Thanks.
Hi there, both. Thank you very much. That was really, really insightful. Question for Harry. On the great retrofit work that you've been doing, what's the cost per square metre that you're working to get that 60% reduction? And also, what's your time frame from when you get first appointed for a project to do the surveying work, come up with a design proposal, to be able to then go to site, basically? Thanks.
Okay, yeah. Can you all hear me? Yeah, good. So the works that we did with Lewisham, we got in for £550 per square metre. Now that was sort of pre-inflation, that huge spike that we experienced last year. So that was prices locked in before that. So I think add 25% to that would be about right. So that answers that one. Obviously, it's about what depth of retrofit, and those were only 3 projects, and we're now pushing 17 through at the moment. So we're going to have a check-in again, sort of in about a year's time, and we'll be able to give a lot more accuracy on the data. In terms of timescales, well, we've got a sort of an interesting. We're not really being appointed like we would with a domestic retrofit project, where we get appointed and we do a stage 1 report, and then we move through stage 4 or 5. It's not really like that. We're applying for the Low Carbon Skills Fund money. We're producing heat decarbonisation plans. We don't really know where they're all heading. We're trying to make the plans as helpful and useful as possible so that other people can take them on. So we're not necessarily holding all these projects. And so we're writing the reports such that they're robust and that there are lots of flags about where the risk points are and how to sort of move forward. But the way we're working at the moment is I don't really know what that timescale is going to be, to be honest. Just as an example, the Southwark Diocesan Board of Education actually has assigned architect surveyors with each school. So we're quite aware that our reports are going to be handed to them in many cases, and they will be taking them forward. Now, we're hoping that we still retain a role, a kind of consultant oversight role, where we can guide the process and perhaps review at strategic phases. So it's not traditional anymore. We're doing what we can, how we can.
Thank you. We've got this lady here in the front.
Thank you. Question for Harry again. My name is Sara. I'm from the Girls' Day School Trust. We also have a large school estate. So Harry, in the work you did for Lewisham, I would be very interested to hear whether you did any calculations on the impact on operational costs. And if so, how was that complicated with the current climate in energy and how the prices are fluctuating?
Yeah, so the really frustrating thing is that we still don't have all the data. And this just says so much about the difficulty of getting data from schools. And it's it's just incredible how hard this is. And so we had a download in November, and we only had a certain about 4 months worth of air source heat pump information, and it was cost neutral, and we were aiming for cost neutral. That was our aim. The very latest over the last winter, I just can't say because we just don't have the information in. We're waiting to get it, and we will have it soon. We always aim for cost neutrality, because if we install LED and if we install solar PV, we're finding that we can actually make it cost neutral for the schools. So that's the aim always, even with the energy price rise.
I think that's really interesting that you're talking about how difficult it is to get the data and to get access to data. I mean, you've just given us an example, Duncan, of that. Do you want to just pick up on that difficulty?
I do think, optimistically, it will get easier, actually, because from what I saw throughout the process of my project, I think schools are really starting to become sort of switched on to it because of COVID, and then obviously what's happened with gas prices. The interesting thing is, I think you have to give these technologies to schools before they actually they know what questions they want to ask somehow, because the schools I went into that were right at the start, that were 1960s schools that hadn't been retrofitted yet, they were saying, we really want to do something, but we don't know how to ask questions or anything. So when I had the questionnaire, I left it quite open, and I said to them, these are what suggested improvements do you have to your school site? And there were a lot of responses actually to that part of the questionnaire. So I think that in the future it will become easier to get data from schools, because actually they're becoming more switched on.
Yeah, I did just to add. I don't know how many of you are aware of. There's obviously lots of different types of meter, and there's different levels of data you can get. And what we're finding is that one of the really important things we need to know about schools is what the electricity capacity is, and whether the air source heat pump is going to tip the school over its current capacity. And so what we're looking at the moment, and one of the things we've encouraged schools to get with the recent funding that they've received, the energy efficiency funding from the DFE, is to actually seriously consider investing in live energy monitoring. And live energy monitoring is such a powerful tool, and there's evidence to say that it can cut 5 to 10% costs of energy use year by year for a number of years, and then it can be used as a way of preventing slip back in the future, so you can maintain performance. And I'll just give you one example. A lot of schools have kitchen staff that come in at 7 a.m. and the kitchen's freezing because there's usually no heating in the kitchen. So what they do is they turn on the gas hobs and the gas ovens to keep warm, and then the ventilation system kicks in big time because of the burnt gases. And I was standing in a kitchen the other day, and I just had this sort of cold air going down my neck, and it was absolutely freezing. And I just thought, oh my God, I think this must be replicated across so many schools across the UK. And they're not even getting warm. So just a small radiant panel would be brilliant. But the thing about live energy monitoring and having a database is that it actually starts to tell you these stories. So it tells you what your weekend baseline, what your holiday baselines, and you can start to benchmark, and you can really start to interrogate. So I really encourage schools to sort of try and get systems like that. And we're in the process of putting some in.
It is pulling out that so that it's visible. You can't, if you can't measure it, how can you reduce it if you can't get sight of it? I'm conscious. We'll go David there, and then I know you have your hand up. We'll come to you as well.
Probably a question for Harry again. If a school has something like solar done or a retrofit plan, how do you engage the students on a constant basis? Do you build it into the curriculum, and if so, who delivers that education and engagement?
Yeah, good question. I think we're always thinking about legacy, and we don't want to be just doing a workshop and then that sort of stops. So, it's really for the schools to hold this and to kind of move forward. So, what we're finding, and what the Department for Education, Sustainability and Climate Change strategy has in place and is encouraging schools to do, is to embed all this into the curriculum. So it should be being embedded right now. That is what the strategy says. So I see us as sort of boosting that and sort of giving them sort of pointers and ideas. And in case anybody's interested, we've been so busy, we've had such a fast growth, and we're really trying to make an impact that we haven't
managed to get good resources yet onto our website. Our website is hopelessly out of date. It's all in progress, but we do want to be able to share resources, and so we anticipate a future where we have lots of guidance available and ways of engaging students with solar PV data and classroom air quality and things like that. So
I dare say there's an opportunity for collaboration around creating that set of resources that I'm sure there's lots of people in the audience who might be itching to contribute to or help, because that's what we want. We want lots of collaboration. I'm going to come to you because you had your hand up. And then any other women in the room like to ask a question? We'd like to hear from more women's voices. Go ahead.
Question for Harry. I'm a student at CAT, and it's circular building that we're doing. I'm thinking about how did you approach circular building when you were looking at these schools, and in particular, the Velux windows you put in. What happened to the single glazing windows? Did you manage to recirculate them back into the building somehow, or did they just go to waste?
That's a really, really good point. In that case, they went to waste. So we're actually so there's another project in Bourneville that we've done where we actually did manage to reuse all the glazing. So we upgraded the buildings in the main house, and then the client was so engaged. This is in Retrofit Counts publication, and we used this sort of really rubbish double and single glazing, and we relocated it into the extension at the back of the building, which didn't need to meet building regs, but it's this lovely garden room, and then we upgraded the main windows to triple glazing. So we do have those thought processes in place, but we didn't manage to get that into that particular project. It's hard. It needs a huge effort, but we are trying to move towards it, and we are actually we're just about to finish a study for the Department for Education that's going to be published on an open government license, and it's going to be looking at whole life carbon, so a sort of 60-year appraisal of operational and embodied carbon on the step-by-step retrofit of primary schools. So there's a big study that we've done that we'll be folding into that. So we have some insights around what you've just touched on. So
I think we probably have time for one more question. This lady here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more guidance on how schools can get this energy efficiency or current energy use data, and how that could be also fed out to other industries, council buildings, etc.?
So I just met 20 premises managers yesterday, and we're encouraging them to take weekly readings, put them into a spreadsheet, and start to graph it and start to sort of look at patterns of change. So that's the sort of basic. You can we're working with a school in Portsmouth at the moment that actually that Hampshire has this fantastic live energy monitoring service for every school. And they have the whole school is monitored, and they have half-hourly data graphically presented. So there's these extremes. So the very basic is get frequent meter readings and graph them and track change over time.
I have actually one thing to add there, actually, because when I was in the schools with dashboards, the thing that I was amazed at was the ability of the staff to basically tabulate this data in Excel, having taken the live data from the dashboard. And actually, I think we have to account better for how schools might analyse the data in the future, because actually they are interested in what's happened over the past year. They're not so much interested in what's happening right now. And I think dashboards in the schools that I saw certainly were set up to give a live reading, and actually the historical data is really important.
I think what's come through and what's really interesting in what you're both saying is the engagement bit, Harry, you talked about being really key, and you're looking at swathes and swathes of data, and you need people to give that to you. And then just as a sort of an overview point on retrofit generally, we need to remember, and you do this really well through your work, and you've both explained that there is knowledge, power, skill sets available within the schools or the houses or the projects or whatever that you're working with, and it's really important to engage with that. So it's not like we'll do an engagement workshop to show you your options, pick one, you're done. It's engagement in saying, well, can we enable the skills and the knowledge that you have and bring that out to add it in, because actually the scale, do we know the scale of the issue of retrofit? I think we do, and we know that we need all hands around to sort of help that. And also just to respect that people have those skills, so let's not pretend that we have to do all of that. Let's see, have we got time for one more question? We've got one more question here. Yeah, here comes the mic.
Hi, I'm Robert Cohen. I'm here with Hat as a trustee for Energy Sparks.
A bit closer.
Robert Cohen. I'm a trustee for Energy Sparks. I just thought I'd shout out for them because they provide a service to Energy Sparks. Look it up. Service for schools providing remote monitoring and advice on how to improve things that are going wrong.
Just in case you didn't hear that, go to Energy Sparks. Look them up. They're doing some really great work. Really, really good point.
We have come to the end, which I feel is such a shame because I think there's a lot more that everybody wants to know what's in both of your minds, and we need to replicate you and your brains and share that wider. Thanks very much for coming today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Can we round of applause for our speakers, please?